Welcome everybody to the Uncle Hayes Q&A. Today I'll be answering some questions that I asked for in a community post. Got them right here. Also some questions I've seen in my comments from time to time that I never really answered. These are about the NBA, the NBA's history, the ABA, even a few personal ones, so this should be fun. But please stay until the end of the video. I have an important channel update that I really want to give. Thank you. Question 1. Who is your favorite 70s NBA player? This might be kinda obvious, but my favorite 70s player, as well as just player in general, is John Havlicek. I think he's so unique. Very unique arc. Starts off as this underrated defensive specialist. He's the sixth man, then he becomes an all-star, eventually a superstar. I don't really think people usually acknowledge how much he did for the Celtics in the playoffs in those late 60s years. Then when Russell leaves, he becomes the superstar. Then he wins it in 1974, proving that he can win without Russell, which is pretty cool. Has really good longevity. He's everything I wish I was as a player, honestly. You know, elite offensively, defensively, super clutch. He can run like no other. Lots of hustle. And he's a gentleman on and off the court. So that's pretty cool. But I like a lot of those 70s Celtics players, like Dave Cowens, Don Nelson, JoJo White, Don Chaney. I think that's such like a great core right there. Paul Silas as well. Can't forget him. Who else? Besides those, I would probably say Jerry Sloan, Norm Van Leer, and Bob Love on the 70s Bulls. I think those guys are cool. As well as Dave DeBusschere, Walt Frazier, Earl Monroe on the Knicks. Elvin Hayes and Wes Unseld are also good picks. I was born in Virginia, and, well, I know the Bullets were technically a Maryland team, but here we still kind of claim them as our team, so I have some attachment to those guys. Yeah, I would say those are my favorites. Question 2. What is your all-time ABA starting five? Cool. Let's see. When I make a starting five, I usually like to think more in terms of talent rather than just the roles, but my starting five would probably be Louis Dampier, Roger Brown, Julius Erving, Mel Daniels, and Artis Gilmore. Yeah, I would say those are my five right there. Honorable mentions go to George Gervin, Connie Hawkins, Spencer Haywood, George McGinnis, Billy Cunningham. Question 3. What battles did we miss out on because of the NBA and ABA being separate leagues? Well, you say battles, so I'm gonna say a fistfight between Wendell Ladner and Kermit Washington is the battle that we most missed out on. Okay, I'll seriously answer the question now. Well, the first one that comes to mind would just be the Indiana Pacers teams versus anybody, versus the Lakers, versus the Bucks. If we're talking about specific players, I would want to see how Roger Brown and Julius Erving would do against guys like John Havlicek, Bob Dandridge, and then a young Artis Gilmore versus Kareem. I think that would have been awesome. Yeah, those are the matchups that stick out to me the most. Question 4. When are you going to make a top 10 or top 50 list? This is a question, probably the question that I get asked the most, and I'm kind of hesitant to answer it because some people might think this is a lame answer, but I don't really believe in ranking players. Well, no, I kind of do. I mean, I have a sense over who I would want on a team more when I kind of do player evaluations. But as far as making a video detailing the specific rankings, it's an idea that doesn't really excite me all that much, because I kind of treat everything with an air of, oh, you know, I can change my mind at any possible moment, and I don't know if that would be really entertaining for a video like top 10 NBA players of all time, because I'm not really trying to change anyone's mind, or at least that's not what I want to do that much. Although I do try and be as positive as I can in videos. There have been points when I'm editing a video. In my script, I write something critical about a player, and then I record it. But when I'm editing, I'll take that clip out because, I don't know, I just don't like saying bad things about people that I don't really know. So is it possible I make a top 50 list? Yeah, sure. But it might be a while before I do that. Question 5. Who are your favorite NBA coaches? If we're talking historically, then I think Red Auerbach is probably the best, which is kind of a hot take, saying he's better than Phil Jackson or Greg Popovich. But I don't think people really understand how much Red did for the Celtics. I mean, he had no assistant coaches to speak of, he was the general manager, and I don't think anyone has ever gotten as much use out of a team like Red did. He's probably the greatest talent evaluator that we've ever seen in the NBA. Is he the best X's and O's coach? Probably not. In fact, the Celtics only ran 7 plays during the 50s and 60s, but in terms of motivating players, I don't think there's anyone who's been able to do it quite as well. Besides him, I really like Bill Sharman. I talk about Bill Sharman's coaching career briefly in my upcoming documentary, but Sharman was very revolutionary in terms of coaching. He basically invented team shoot-around. He was very much in tune with health studies at the time, like telling players to eat pasta before games. And he won championships in the ABA, the ABL, and the NBA, proving that, he wasn't just a one-trick pony. I also like Don Nelson. Now, the biggest knock against him is that he never won a championship, but he was pretty influential with his Nalii ball lineups, putting 3 or 4 guards out on the floor at a time, having forwards as ball handlers, and facilitators inverting the offense so that guards post up. Small ball lineups usually have a reputation of being, really good on offense, but pretty bad on defense. But the 80s Bucks were a really good defensive team, which is pretty cool. Some other coaches I'm a fan of: Alex Hannum, definitely, Jack Ramsey, Lenny Wilkins, and Larry Brown. Question 6. Does it annoy you when modern fans make fun of past decades or are completely biased? Yeah, I try not to get too mad over what people online say, but honestly, it does annoy me quite a bit. Not in a, I have to defend my favorite player's honor kind of way. It just makes me wonder if people who insult legends of the past are really fans of the game. We should be thankful for every single person who has played in the NBA. Hundreds of people have walked just so this modern generation can run. I also don't get why it's acceptable to crap on old players for needing to have an off-season job to support their families. That just seems very disrespectful to me. There are a lot of NBA players nowadays who stream on Twitch or do YouTube in their free time. Are they not good because they have a second job? The amount of trials and tribulations players from yesteryear went through are things that players today will never really understand. Come on, black players couldn't even be housed or served in some cities that they had to play in. I also can't stand when people say, imagine if Steph Curry was in 1964. Time travel is not a real thing, so why do we act like hypotheticals like this are fact? To me, it's the same as saying, Napoleon was a good general for his time, but he was fighting against part-time cobblers and farmers. He would get destroyed by the modern US military. We're never going to see that come to fruition, ever. So, I don't know, I just don't see much point in debating about that. Question 7. How old are you? The manly age of 20. I'll be 21 on July 18th. Question 8. Why do you love the 70s NBA, and what do you think about the modern NBA? To answer the first part of your question, I'm just really fascinated by things that came before my time. My favorite movies, music, games. I would say 90% of it is old school. I don't know why, I just think that seeing old footage of a time that I was not alive for is very interesting. Maybe because it's something that I'll never really be able to experience. I wouldn't call myself a history buff. I definitely do have an interest in history, specifically early American history, up until the Gilded Age, the First Persian Empire, ancient Rome and Greece, World War II, and other weird and funny stories from history, like the Emu War, if you know what that is. But I don't really have a desire to learn everything that there is to know. I just learn the things that interest me and that I find funny. And the reason I like the 70s specifically is because I think it's a very funny and interesting decade, specifically for American art. I think that's the best decade for movies, also the greatest time since the American Civil War for facial hair. The NBA in the 70s is just very chaotic to me. New expansion teams being added, street ball beginning to leak into the more fundamental styles. The way I see basketball is, I see the court as a canvas, and the players are different colors that you can paint with. I probably sound like a hippie by saying that, but that's how I see most things. Like when I play music, I'm just thinking in terms of colors. The ABA, then the merger, drug issues. It's just a very interesting decade of basketball, and, a very interesting decade in American history. Yeah, that's why I like the 70s NBA. As for the second part, yeah, I do really like the modern NBA, but I'm not a huge fan of all the three-pointers. Don't get me wrong, it's an impressive skill, but for me, I think it puts the balance of a game in the hands of chance more than anything. For example, if a team is down by 10 points with 30 seconds left, the three-pointer is a great way for the team that's losing to come back. But on the other hand, the winning team worked really hard to get into that position, and I think it's a little unfair to have that work be completely erased by a couple of long-distance shots. But besides that, my only real complaint is with modern NBA discourse, specifically online. Yeah, it's a interesting place. Question 9. Where did you get that Larry Bird poster? If you don't know what this is referring to, in my video about Game 5 of the 1976 finals, I show a poster of Larry Bird, an autographed poster. I bought this from the Pawn Stars Gold and Silver shop when I went to Las Vegas for my 19th birthday. The shop also had a pair of Kareem game-worn goggles, but I only had $100 on me, so my only options were to buy a framed autograph. Question 10. What do you think of Tom Meschery? He's pretty cool. You don't often hear him mentioned as one of the first international NBA stars. He has a very interesting upbringing, born in, well, China now, to Russian parents, who left in 1917 to escape the October Revolution. Then Tom grows up in Japan during World War II at an internment camp, and then he moves to San Francisco. In the NBA, he had a reputation for fouling and getting into fights, which may lead some to believe that he was some angry Russian brute, but Meschery was so much more. He was a good defender and could space the floor, and after he retired, he became a frickin' author and a poet. Each chapter in Tall Tales by Terry Pluto is prefaced by a short poem Meschery wrote. They're pretty good, honestly. He also spoke a lot about race relations, and he lends an interesting perspective on it with his multicultural background. Question 11. Which ABA team do you wish could have merged with the NBA? Ooh, good question. I would probably choose the Kentucky Colonels. I mean, historically, Kentucky has produced a ton of basketball talent, and the Colonels were one of the only ABA teams to not relocate or change their name during the league's 9 years. They also made the playoffs every year, including 3 finals appearances and 1 championship. Question 12. Do you think the Baltimore/Capital/Washington Bullets were really the best NBA team of the 70s? If we're talking about peak teams, then no. I'd say either the Bucks or Lakers were the best team in that regard. The Knicks and Celtics were the only teams to win more than 1 championship in the decade as well. But though the Bullets may not have hit the same highs, I don't think they hit the same lows as those other teams did for the rest of the decade. The Bullets were probably the best, consistently good team. They were the only NBA team to make the playoffs every single year of the 70s, and they also made the finals 4 times, which was more than any other NBA team in the decade. Yeah, sustained greatness is pretty important to me when we talk about best teams from any era, so that's why I would say the Bullets were the best team of the 70s, but who do you think was the team of the decade? Question 13. Why Castlevania 3? Why not? No, I'm just kidding. I'm a really big fan of the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Super Nintendo. Besides the Wii, those are the only consoles I've ever owned. The NES is the one I have the most games for, and I'm a super big fan of Castlevania, but I had never played Castlevania 3 until around the summer of 2022, I think, and I just fell in love with it. I think Dracula's Curse is the best Castlevania game, so that's a big reason, but another reason was because I'm a big fan of the Angry Video Game Nerd, and in his Castlevania Part 2 retrospective, he has a really cool edit where he plays stage 1 of the Castlevania 3 music, and shows clips of all the boss battles, and I don't know why, but that little part just always stuck with me, and I thought, what if it was that, but with basketball? Since I'm on an NES tangent, I also want to say that I've beaten Battletoads twice, and the Ninja Gaiden trilogy are my favorite NES games, even more so than Castlevania. Specifically Ninja Gaiden 2, The Dark Sword of Chaos, is my favorite game, although Part 3, The Ancient Ship of Doom, has really incredible music. Question 14. Are you ever going to expand to more modern NBA topics? Maybe. A lot of my favorite players in games are actually from the 2000s, and when I started my channel, I originally planned on mainly being a current events kind of guy, but I was also starting to read a lot more about Legends of the Past, and eventually just kind of swept me away. I like talking about people that most people usually don't talk about, and I feel like there's been so much already said about the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s that I just worry that I'll never be able to add anything interesting to the conversation. I've only talked about Michael Jordan maybe once or twice on this channel. It's not because I think he's bad. I just don't know what else I can really add to the conversation around him. Another reason why I don't do much modern stuff is that I just don't think I have much to offer to the basketball community other than history. My analysis of the game is nothing compared to guys like Thinking Basketball, and I'd just be embarrassing myself trying to do that. But if a certain story really grabs me, then yeah, I would totally do a mini doc about something a little more modern. Question 15. What is your all-time what if starting five? Okay, interesting. The way I'm interpreting the term what if is a player who had their career held back or ended prematurely due to outside factors. So if I'm picking a team that I would want to compete with the best of the best, for me, my point guard would be Brandon Roy, my shooting guard would be Drazen Petrovic, small forward, David Thompson, power forward Maurice Stokes, and center, Bill Walton. Some would probably choose Derrick Rose for the point guard, and I can understand why. I'm going to go with Roy because I think he was the better three-point shooter. Speaking of shooters, I always remember the episode of Open Court where Reggie Miller says that Drazen Petrovic was the greatest shooter ever, and that he was also the best trash talker ever, mainly because Reggie couldn't understand his accent. David Thompson might be a few inches short to play the three, but I think he's explosive enough and athletic enough to make up for it. Then Maurice Stokes, who is one of the saddest stories in NBA history, and Bill Walton, a lot of great passing, and interior defense. And my sixth man for this team would be Roy Tarpley. Question 16. What is your favorite story you've read about the 70's Celtics? Great question, huh? I'd say in general just learning how Red ran the practices, but if you want a specific story, I would probably go with this time in 1957 when the team was driving to an exhibition game. And when they did this, they would drive in different cars. Red would drive one of them, and by all accounts, he was a terrible driver. But this one time, Red started driving on the wrong side of the road so that the players in his car could get a better shot at throwing apples at the other car. Yeah, so he gets pulled over by the cops for driving on the wrong side of the road, and then the cops take him up into the mountains to meet the Justice of the Peace, which in reality is this old dude sitting on the front porch of a log cabin, and he doesn't even know who the Celtics are. And Red had to pay $25 or spend the night in jail. I don't know why, that story just has a sort of Deliverance vibe to me. Question 17. Who is your favorite ABA player? Probably Bob Nedelicki. He's just so quirky and entertaining to read about, and he was pretty good as well, so that helps. I also really love Larry Brown and Doug Moe. The chapter in Loose Balls about their friendship and connection on the court is one of my favorites in that book. Speaking of which, question 18. Do you have any favorite basketball books? Loose Balls, Loose Balls, Loose Balls. I have to mention it whenever I talk about the ABA. I just really love Terry Pluto's writing style. For those who don't know, Loose Balls is an oral history of the ABA, but it's told from the players themselves. The book is essentially just a bunch of quotes, and he strings the quotes together into a story. But even though Loose Balls was the first basketball book I really fell in love with, I have to say, I think Pluto's other book, Tall Tales, is slightly better. Loose Balls might be funnier, but Tall Tales pulls at your heartstrings in a ton of ways. The chapter about Maurice Stokes and Jack Twyman, the racism the early black players had to endure, and lots of other little moments where they talk about the players' upbringings really got to me. There's also such a bittersweet feeling around the whole book. The way the legends describe how things used to be, they really just evoke this feeling that what they all went through was special, and that we'll never quite see anything like it again. Question 19. What is your favorite NBA game of all time? Oh boy. For me, it's not even a question. Game 4, 2000 Finals. I'm really glad this was one of the games the NBA uploaded in its entirety during the pandemic, because I just love everything about it. Shaq plays great, and then he fouls out, but then Kobe takes over in overtime. Reggie Miller is one of my favorite players, and he really shines in this game. Rick Smits also starts off great, although he gets into foul trouble early on. Then there's a ton of good play from guys like Jalen Rose, Robert Horry, Sam Perkins, Austin Crocier, and Travis Best. I love the look of the late 90s, early 2000s film footage. The NBC intro gives me a really warm and cozy feeling, like I'm at the beach. That probably sounds really weird, but that's just what I associate with that. In my personal life, I had a brief stint working at an Amazon warehouse, but we couldn't get internet over there. So what I would do was I screen recorded this game on my phone, and then I would just watch it 4 times each night I was working. Question 20. Besides Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who do you think was the best NBA center in the 70s? For me, I'd say Dave Cowens. Bob McAdoo is another player in that conversation, but Cowens is everything that I would want in a center. Constant motor, hard worker, never willing to back down, he can knock down some shots from outside, and a great rebounder. Also, he's got some quirky off-court stories, which is important to me. Question 21. Could any ABA championship teams have beaten the NBA championship teams? Wow, this is a really cool question, huh? Although, I think it really deserves a deep breakdown in its own video. So, for the time being, what I'll do is I'll post some general thoughts on screen and editing about what I think each series would look like. I'll guess who wins, in how many games, as well as some of the key matchups and deciding factors. Obviously there's a lot of speculation with this, but these are the things that I would be looking for in the hypotheticals. Question 22. What is your favorite NBA jersey? Good question. I think I would go with the late 90s Jazz, the purple or blue mountains. I think those look so incredible. The Warriors ones, with the state on them. Oh, can't believe I almost forgot this. The 2000s Pacers pinstriped jerseys, those are my favorites. Question 23. What do you think was the best NBA Finals in the 1970s? I'm torn between 1970, 74, and 77. 76 usually gets most of the attention because of Game 5, but I think I'll go with 74. Question 24. What do you think was the best 70s team to not win a championship? Good question. If you mean one specific team, I think I would go with the 77 Sixers. Dr. J, George McGinnis, Doug Collins, World Be Free, Daryl Dawkins, Steve Mix, Henry Bibby. On paper, they had enough to win the championship, but a lack of team chemistry ultimately held them back. As far as a core group of players who were really solid for a couple of seasons, but never sealed the deal, then I would choose the early 70s Bulls. They're one of the most underrated teams ever. When I talk with fans who are around my age, they have absolutely no idea that the Bulls were ever good before Michael Jordan. Norm Van Lier and Jerry Sloan is one of the best defensive backcourts of all time. Then you have a good jump-shooting small forward, also one of the best at drawing fouls, Chet Walker, a very diverse two-way power forward, Bob Love, and one of the best passing centers in NBA history, and later Clifford Ray, one of the most underrated centers of the 70s. And it's not like they never had any playoff success. They made the West Finals twice, and in 1975 they took the Warriors to 7 games, and then they took the Lakers to 7 games in the West Semis in 1971 and 73. Question 25. What story from the NBA or the ABA in the 1970s would you want to see turned into a movie? I would want to see a comedy about the 1975 Spirits of St. Louis, with Marvin Barnes scared to get on a plane, doing cocaine on the sideline, Fly Williams refusing to fix his missing teeth, Harry Weltman losing his mind, and a young Bob Costas doing his best to not get fired. I think that would be pretty funny. But for a more serious movie, a biopic about Connie Hawkins would be pretty cool. Question 26. What's your favorite fact you've learned about NBA history? Good question. I suppose the first thing that pops out in my mind is learning about Wilt Chamberlain and Butch Van Brodikoff. I never even knew they had beef, which was pretty crazy to read about. Oh, also learning about Pistol Pete, learning about his childhood, his playing career, also post-retirement, he's a really interesting guy. Yeah, I think he's just like such a unique person. Also Jerry West. I never knew he had such a hard upbringing, and the title of his book honestly just summarizes his life so perfectly. My Charmed, Tormented Life. Question 27. If you could return one team to its original city, who would you choose? Buffalo. Give Buffalo back its NBA team. They were on the rise in the 70s East until management sabotaged the team just to go to California, where it took decades for them to get a taste of the success the Braves had gotten in those 3 McAdoo, Ramsey, and Randy Smith seasons. Question 28. What can you tell us about your Celtics documentary? For those who don't know, my next project I'm currently editing is an hour-long documentary about the rise and fall of the Celtics from 1946 to 1969, but with a big emphasis on the stories of Red, Bill, Bob, John, Sam, their friendship, their eccentricities, their differences, and what made them into the most dominant professional sports dynasty. I want it to be a video that people who aren't even into basketball can enjoy, and my dream would be for it to change the way people look at the sport and what it means to be a competitor and a human. I want it to be the one that people remember me for. Question 29. What do you think was Bill Russell's best Celtics team? This is actually a really tough question for me, even though I've done a ton of research on that dynasty. 1965 is the answer you see most of the time, probably because they had the best regular season record, but they were one John Havlicek steal away from losing to the Sixers, and they got to face the Lakers without Elgin Baylor in the finals, so yeah, I wouldn't say they were undoubtedly the best. 1960, 61, and 62 are also in the mix, but I think I might go with the 1964 Celtics. Bill Russell, Sam Jones, John Havlicek, Tom Heinsohn, Casey Jones, Frank Ramsey, Satch Sanders, Willie Knowles, Jim Lesketoff, Larry Siegfried, and they pretty much cruised through the playoffs, beating the Royals in 5 games, and then the Warriors in 5. Question 30. Are you planning on doing a video on the 70's Sonics? You know, they're one of the teams that I've had on my list of how good were they video ideas for quite a while. I think Dennis Johnson, Gus Williams, Jack Sikma, I think that's such an excellent trio, and I'm interested in learning how it came to an end. Yeah, the 79 SuperSonics were pretty deep. So yeah, I would love to do a video on those guys. Although, now is the part of the video where I have to make a pretty major announcement. After I upload my documentary, I'm going to be stepping down from my YouTube channel for an indiscernible amount of time. Recently, a situation has come up which has really affected me financially, and it's a situation that leaves me unable to make videos consistently. So, I'm gonna have to step down because of the damage I've done to myself trying to make the videos that I love. Does this mean I'll never come back? No, absolutely not, but I'm just not sure about the future right now. But I want to say how much you truly mean the world to me. I'm not just saying that to say that. You're all beautiful. More beautiful than me. And you've made the last few months of my life really something. But I need to get my life figured out. So, stay tuned for that 70's Celtics documentary, and I hope you have a good day. Take care.